All right, so ready to dive into the world of astrology. We're going deep on what a career in this field actually looks like. And wow, the source material you gave me, it's got some real surprises in there.
Yeah, it's really interesting how these sources blend these like ancient practices with cutting edge tech. I'm curious to dig into how those two worlds come together.
Yeah, me too. I started this whole thing thinking it was all about, looking at the stars, reading horoscopes, but turns out being an astrologer, well, it's a lot more than that.
Absolutely. What I'm getting from these resources is they are like celestial data analysts. They're looking at constellations, how planets move, and then they interpret how those positions influence us.
So like someone's personality, their relationships, even their job. That's pretty in-depth.
Yeah, exactly. It's like those memes about Mercury retrograde messing everything up, but like way more complex. Instead of daily predictions, it's about understanding these bigger patterns and cycles. And one thing these sources really emphasize is that astrologers provide like insights to help people understand themselves, not like concrete predictions about the future.
So no guarantees on winning lottery numbers then.
It seems like that's a big misconception.
Yeah.
All these materials, they stress that ethical astrologers, they focus on interpretations, not like telling the future. It's all about managing what clients expect and being responsible with the guidance they give.
Yeah, that makes sense when you think about it, like ethically, right? I mean, imagine someone's going through a tough time looking for answers. It's a lot of responsibility.
Exactly. One of the things the sources talk about is an astrologer setting really clear boundaries. They might have clients who are like really desperate, for answers about their future, but an astrologer has to make it clear. They're there to offer guidance, not predict the future. Subtle difference, but really important for like ethical practice.
Right, and it seems like those ethics are part of every step in an astrologer's career, from when they're just starting out to when they're like seasoned pros.
Hmm.
And speaking of, the career path itself is surprisingly, well, structured. It's not something you just, decide to do overnight.
That's true. These sources lay out a clear progression. They talk about this apprenticeship stage where someone's learning the basics, how to analyze a birth chart, helping out more experienced astrologers, really just building a foundation.
So that's where you learn about the signs, the planets, how to make sense of it all.
Yeah, like learning a new language, except this one's written in the stars.
I like that. So you've mastered the astrological ABCs. Then you become what is it, a junior astrologer? What does that involve?
From what I gather, junior astrologers are starting to like spread their wings a bit. They're taking on more responsibility, doing more independent analysis, even presenting their insights to clients.
Okay, so you're leveling up your stargazing skills. What's the end game? Like when you reach peak astrologer?
They paint this picture of a senior astrologer as like a master, honing their skills over years, maybe doing research, mentoring younger astrologers, or even like writing books and articles.
From apprentice to master. But here's where it gets really interesting. One of the sources said you don't necessarily need like a formal degree to be an astrologer. So how do you even break into this field? It all seems kind of, I don't know, mysterious.
Right. It's not your average career path, that's for sure. And yeah, you don't necessarily need a degree, but a deep understanding of astrology, that's a must. The sources suggest this can come from lots of places, like self-study, maybe online courses, workshops, or even finding a mentor who's already an astrologer.
Hmm.
It's less about the piece of paper, more about showing you really know your stuff.
So you could be self-taught, great at reading charts, and potentially make a career out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about building your client base, getting that experience, always learning.
Very much giving passion project turned career. And speaking of the modern world, one thing that surprised me from the materials was how important technology is. It's not just about old books and telescopes anymore, huh?
No, not at all. And it's interesting. There's this weird paradox. Astrology itself, it's not really based in like traditional science, but modern astrologers are using tech in some super interesting ways.
It's like a cosmic collision of the ancient and the super modern. So what kind of tech are we talking here?
They mentioned data visualization tools,
Hmm.
software for analyzing charts. They even talked about how AI is starting to have a role.
AI astrologers. Okay, now that's something I have to hear more about. But before we go full on digital space exploration, let's get into the nitty gritty. What skills do you actually need to even think about a career in astrology?
Right, good point. Ready to put on our thinking caps.
Okay.
You're right, having a good head for analysis, that's key for any astrologer. Actually, one source pointed out something I didn't expect. Math. Apparently, it's super important in this field.
I gotta say, math isn't exactly the first thing that pops into my head when I think astrologer. I always pictured it as more about like intuition, feeling the cosmic energy, not so much, crunching numbers.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck on those stereotypes, right? But when you really think about it, math is a huge part of it. You're analyzing these complex movements in the sky, interpreting data, looking for patterns that takes a solid understanding of math.
So it's more than just checking your horoscope in the newspaper. There's real brain power involved.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just math, too. The sources talk about critical thinking, being able to learn new things constantly, even just like strong reading comprehension. All those are important.
Which makes sense. You have to be able to really understand the information you're looking at, analyze those birth charts, and then what's key is you got to communicate all that to your clients in a way that makes sense. And speaking of communication, that has to be huge for astrologers, right? You're basically like counseling
Oh,
people.
for sure. You're out working with people who are looking for direction. Maybe they're going through something uncertain. So explaining these complicated ideas in a way that's relatable, where they feel like you get them, that's so important. A good astrologer is analytical, yeah,
Mhm.
but also compassionate.
It's a real mix of like left brain, right brain thinking.
Totally. And we can't forget about tech either. Like we talked about earlier, the sources say being tech savvy is more and more crucial for astrologers these days.
Right. All those data visualization tools, special software. It's a lot. Are we talking like AI generated horoscopes now?
Not exactly AI horoscopes, but the way the sources describe it, it's more about using technology to like boost what they're already doing, having better tools to go deeper, maybe give clients more insightful readings.
So instead of figuring out planetary movements by hand, they might use software to make a visual map.
Right, exactly. Or imagine using data analysis to find trends you might not see just from looking at a chart. It's wild how technology bridges the gap between these old practices and the modern world.
It really is. And speaking of the modern world, there's this one thing, this platform called RoleCatcher. It kept coming up in the research. They make it sound like a total game changer for anyone trying to find a job. But I'm curious, is it really all that?
They market it as like the ultimate job hunting tool, that's for sure. Building your CV, finding jobs, prepping for interviews, networking. They claim to do it all.
Mm.
And their whole thing is using AI to give you a leg up because obviously the job market is so competitive.
So it's like having a career coach in your pocket, but with algorithms instead of, motivational speeches.
Yeah, exactly. And they really push this idea of the AI tailoring your applications, helping you practice for interviews, even like making you stand out to recruiters who are probably using these automated systems to sort through tons of candidates.
It's like they're turning job hunting into a game almost. But honestly, how effective can something like that be? Is it truly revolutionary? Or is it more hype than anything?
That's where you got to be a little skeptical, right? RoleCatcher talks a big game about its features. They throw around data, but I didn't see anything in these sources actually proving those claims. Sure, it's one thing to have a tool that helps you put the right keywords on your CV, but does it actually get you hired? That's the real question.
So maybe it's useful, but not necessarily the miracle solution they make it out to be.
Exactly. It does make you think about the future of job searching, though. What happens when a platform can, like, analyze job descriptions, figure out what skills you're missing, even tell you the best answers to give in an interview? Where does that leave the human side of it all?
Now, those are some big questions. But before we get totally lost in the AI and future of work rabbit hole, let's bring it back to astrology. What else did these sources tell us about what it's like to actually have a career in this field?
Right, good idea. So beyond all the skills, the tech gobber, what do we learn about the day-to-day of being an astrologer?
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, the skills you need, all the tech involved, even some of the ethical stuff. But what about like actually being an astrologer? What are the pros and cons based on what you read?
Well, one big plus the sources bring up is having a flexible schedule, which, let's face it, is a huge perk for a lot of people.
Yeah, being your own boss, setting your own hours, maybe working from home in your pajamas. Sounds pretty sweet. What else is good about a career in astrology?
The sources really emphasize the whole helping people
Yeah.
aspect, guiding people, offering support. And honestly, that's rewarding in any job. But there's something, I don't know, kind of special about helping someone navigate life using these like age-old practices.
It's like being a cosmic therapist or something, helping people find their place in the universe. Pretty cool. But we got to talk about the well, the elephant in the room, or maybe the skeptic at the astrology party. We talked about ethics, but what about the fact that, astrology isn't exactly scientifically proven? That's going to be tough to deal with.
It definitely comes with the territory. The sources admit that the lack of hard scientific evidence, it can be a real hurdle for astrologers. Makes it harder to be taken seriously, especially these days when everything's all about data and proof.
So you're always up against that, like those preconceived notions, maybe some jokes from friends who are like, oh, yeah, you're an astrologer. What's my sign again?
Exactly. Plus, that skepticism can mean, well, your income isn't always predictable. Unlike a regular job with a salary, astrologers, they often rely on building a client base. Takes time, effort, lots of networking.
And I imagine dealing with, challenging clients, people who want you to give them all the answers or who have these crazy expectations for a reading, that can't be easy.
For sure. It goes back to those ethical boundaries we talked about,
Hmm.
setting limits, managing expectations, and always being honest and ethical with your clients. That's so important.
Sounds like being a successful astrologer, it takes more than just knowing about the stars. You got to be a good communicator, a little bit of a therapist, maybe even like a business person all at the same time.
That's actually a perfect way to put it. It's a complex job. You
Yeah,
need
yeah.
that knowledge, yeah, but also intuition, business smarts, all of it.
And probably a thick skin for when people ask you to predict the winning lottery numbers.
Right, exactly.
Speaking of predictions, as we're wrapping up our deep dive on astrology here, one last thought.
Hmm.
All these sources, they focused a lot on the career side of working with the stars. But I'm wondering, what about the personal side? Like, if astrologers believe the stars can influence our lives, how does that make them think about fate versus free will? Just something to ponder.
It's a really interesting question. It kind of gets at the heart of what makes astrology so mysterious, so fascinating.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not about knowing exactly what the future holds, but more about understanding how those cosmic forces work and using that to, I don't know, make the most of our journey, however it unfolds.
It's like we're all navigating by the stars, just some of us have a more detailed map. And on that note, we'll leave you all to ponder your own place in the cosmos. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.